One of my all-time favorite phrases is "stay in your lane." I wish I had a dollar every time I either heard that phrase or said that phrase. That phrase actually has somewhat of a significance with my guest today because I was introduced to her through Instagram. And interestingly enough, her Instagram handle is Kiley's Lane. And in true fashion, similar to Stay in Your Lane, this was a revelation that was given to her where it was almost instruction to stay in her lane. And it was a lane that God had appointed for her. And in true fashion and in true spirit, she's actually having this conversation in her car, which I can't help but feel is a fitting environment for us to have this conversation. And with that being said, I want to thank you, Kiley, for giving of your time and for coming on and having the conversation with me.
Yes. Well, thank you for your time and thank you for having me.
So, one of the things that has been an unintended benefit and unintended blessing with these conversations is community. And I was privileged and I was honored to be able to chat with you the other day. And it was probably one of the best introductory video conversations I've had. I've been very big on alignment, I've been very big on agreement, I've been very big on being united in purpose. And when that conversation ended, I couldn't help but sense that you and I were in both alignment and agreement with not only some of the experiences that we've had within our lives, but also with the journey that God has had us on. And so that's where I'd like to begin. What I'd like to do is I'd like to learn a little bit more about you. I'd like for anyone that listens to this or watches this to learn about who Kiley Lane is. And so I would like to ask you to describe for me how you came to this journey where you decided that you were going to create an Instagram handle, you were going to create Kiley's Lane, and now you're putting yourself out there for all the world to see as you undertake this. The only way that I can describe it is a journey of healing, a journey of growth, and a journey of maturity.
Yeah. So when I first started this journey, it was not going to be social media. I am very uncomfortable with social media, very awkward on camera. Actually, I hate camera. I hate pictures. So when I first was kind of given this idea to share my story publicly and I just remember being like, there's no way. I mean, there's no way that could be something that could be my calling because I'm so uncomfortable on camera. And how am I supposed to share who I am and my story in front of millions of people? But that's kind of where Kylie's Lane came from. God kind of spoke to me at that time that this is a testimony that it's not about me, it's about others and impacting others. And when I kind of heard that, I was like, okay, so I think I could do this not for me, you know? And so it started over a little over 8 years ago. Um, I lost my twin brother to suicide.
Well,
Through that journey, I think I lost close to 3 years of my own personal life. Like I almost lost my own life in those 3 years. I didn't know how to grieve. I didn't know how to deal with emotions, how to deal with loss, but I knew something significantly was gone from me. And being my twin, that's my other half was gone. And so I really didn't know how to cope with it and how to process it. And me, like so many others, I chose the unhealthy coping paths. I mean, everything that could numb me is what I did, minus drugs. But I mean, it was alcohol, it was junk food, it was just anything that could numb the pain. And I was married at the time and had a blended family and 4 children together and running a very successful business, family business that I had been in a part of for years. So during that time, I just lost myself. I went through a really, really, really hard stage. And a year in, I started having extreme health issues and bleeding every day. And then we went into COVID, and I just didn't have, there was no support during that time. And so it was just a long journey of healing and trying to figure out what that looked like in a natural, holistic way for somebody who's never dealt with that. So I went through that process I did every healing mechanism you can think of, from EMDR processing to energy healing to hypnosis to going to Hippocrates Health Institute, doing a 3 week, all raw, fully mind, body, spirit healing. And what I learned through that is there was so much underneath that I had not dealt with. And so it doesn't matter. I'm a holistic nutritionist major. I love all things nutrition, health, fitness. And so when I went through that journey of extreme alcohol, extreme junk food, all the things, it went against everything I knew. And I knew that was not the healing path, but I didn't know what to do with the emotional stuff. Fast forward, I started my social media brand about a year and a half ago, just hoping to share what I had learned, what I had gone through, hoping that somebody that needed that same support knew they weren't alone. And I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to
Mhm.
start. If you go back to, and I started mostly on TikTok, that's where I saw the most growth. But if you go back to my initial video on that, it steered so much from what I started with just because of the dynamic of what the audience was and what they wanted. And I found myself following that trend instead of what my purpose was on that platform. And so that's where it started. There's a lot of in between in that. I don't know if you want me to go further into that, if there's questions that you have for that part before going into kind of the new journey.
Kylie, you are the first person that I've talked with that has experienced suicide. Um, that's something that is very near to me. I don't know if I shared this with you when we spoke the other day, but December of, I don't even want to know, maybe 20, I don't want to say 2015, maybe before then. My mom is the youngest of seven kids, and the next youngest was my Aunt Patty, and they were best friends. And I don't want to necessarily say that they were inseparable, but years ago, I remember getting a phone call. I remember hearing my mom break the news that her sister had committed suicide. And so it's something that it was difficult for me to hear. It was difficult for me to handle because I too had a very good relationship with her. She was probably my favorite aunt. I probably had the greatest relationship with her to this day. I have memories of going to her house and remember banana pudding. And I remember playing with her. She had two kids, actually three kids, but I remember growing up with two and trading baseball cards and football cards and all of these different things. And so that's something that has touched my family, and so that's something that I am somewhat familiar with, but Kylie, I can't imagine what it's like to not only just deal with somebody close to you that committed suicide, but as you described, your other half, and you said that Aaron was your twin brother, and so I'm curious what it was like growing up with Aaron. I'm curious what your relationship with him was like, because I really want to understand that. What was it like when you guys were growing up? What was it like when you were teenagers? You guys shared the same birthday. You guys were the same age. So I can only imagine what your experiences were like.
Yeah, they were amazing. There's something about a twin. So that there's four of us. I have two sisters and then my twin brother. And there's something different about a twin. You just can't explain. I'm very close with my other sister, although growing up we were not, and we're only 15 months apart. So it's twins and then 15 months younger. So it's almost like triplets at some point. But Aaron and I we were so polar opposite in every way. He was extremely brilliant and I'm talking quantum physics and computer engineering and just he was so brilliant. And I was the social and athlete, and he's very social and very likable, but we were just so different in that way. So, but we always had this incredible bond that it didn't matter where we were, what we were doing, who's, I mean, we just always had this connection. And I'll never forget, Aaron joined the military at 18. So he had PTSD. He was in 11 and a half years. Aaron joined the military and I went to college. And so we separated. Well, I don't know, 9 years into his military experience, he was in Alaska and honestly almost died. We got a call in the middle of the night that he was in ICU, and I knew before. So I woke up and I just knew. I was like, something's wrong with him. And my mom came in and she gave me the news. So anyway, that's just a testimony of what it's like. I mean, I felt his pain. He felt my pain. We just, even no matter how far we were separated, always felt we just always felt the same thing. Like he would call me when I'd have a breakup, and he would just know something was wrong, or vice versa. So I don't know. It's one of those things that's hard to describe, but it's a relationship that you never will, unless you've been there, you don't know. There's no way to know that bond. And so when Aaron did commit suicide, I mean, he at the time, we had moved back to New Mexico together after 12 years of being apart and moved back together. And he worked for us for a family business and was going to college to get his master's in engineering. So there was just this, when this all happened, I mean, we were 35 years old. So it's 35 years of our life that not one year did I celebrate a birthday without him. And I don't mean physically, because when he was in the military and all that, but it was our birthday. And so when he passed away, that became a real struggle. Who am I without him? Who am I without him? Because I've lived 35 years sharing my birthday with somebody and sharing my identity almost with somebody. And so that became a whole journey on its own. And that's where I think I consider it, like to say that's the undoing that started happening. I just kind of started undoing what had always been and what I'd always thought. Um, so yeah, it's been really hard. I mean, I just celebrated. I know you have an April birthday, but I just had a birthday in April. This is 8 years later, and it's still hard. That's a day that I don't really wanna celebrate because it's just, more than the date of his death, that is that this to me is something I don't know that I'll ever truly want to do by myself. So, I don't know if that answered your question, but that's a journey.
October 15th of 2021, I stood in a hospital room here in Virginia, and in the hospital bed was my dad, and he had been on a machine that had helped him breathe. And my brother and I had received a phone call in the morning that they were going to transition him to comfort care. He wasn't responding to any stimuli, and at this point, it was just preparing him to die. It was
Mm,
making him as comfortable as possible for when that transition happened. I remember my brother and I, this was during the height of the pandemic. I remember my brother and I standing outside the hospital room just looking at him through the glass window. And when the nurses saw how emotional that made us, they made an exception and allowed us into the room. So they dressed us to the nine with medical gowns and gloves and masks and goggles, and they let us go in the room, and they turned the alarm off. And if anyone has watched any movie or TV show, when that alarm goes off and you hear that just flatline consistent beeping, you know exactly what has happened. And so they disabled that so we wouldn't hear it. But with that being said, I watched his chest rise and fall for the last time. I watched him take his last breath, and I will never forget what it was like going through that experience. Even to this day, almost 5 years later, it is still something that impacts me. It is still something that affects me. To your point, I just celebrated a birthday on Monday. I turned 43. And I tell people as best as I can, birthdays and holidays just don't feel the same way having experienced that loss. having experienced that pain, I know that it's something that my mom can say, having lost a sister. Actually, she's lost a couple sisters. Having lost my dad, they just don't have the same impact. They don't have, to me, it's just another day. Someone asked me a question the other day. Do you like when people sing happy birthday to you? And without even thinking about it, I responded by saying no. I don't.
Mm.
I don't like it for some reason. Whether it's a trigger for me, I really don't know.
Yeah.
But to me, days and holidays just don't feel the same. And this is having experienced the death of my dad. I can only imagine what it was like for you to celebrate your birthday with someone for 35 years, and then birthday number 36 rolls around. And instead of it being a two-person birthday, it's a one-person birthday. When 9/11 took place, I remember where I was. I remember I was in Bible college at the time. I remember I had just finished a Book of Acts quiz. I remember being in the snack shop when the news broke and I saw on TV that the events had taken place with the first plane hitting the tower. And so you remember where you were, you remember how you felt when significant events take place. When the news of the pandemic hit, I remember where I was. When you heard the news and when you received the report that your brother had committed suicide, that he had taken his own life, do you remember where you were, what you were doing, and what you were feeling when that news finally broke or when you received that news?
Yeah, very much so, very vividly. As a matter of fact, because, and this is probably a really powerful story um, in that twin aspect, but Aaron, because he had PTSD, he suffered for years. He was not okay for years. And as a matter of fact, when he first came back, after his first few tours, we were so worried about him even then. You could see him slowly dying daily, just a lack of care. Like he just didn't care. And so for years we've kind of dealt with that, his PTSD, and wondering how do we help him, and what, and Aaron, like so many, I think, military men and women probably, they're trained, right? They're trained to do these things, fulfill these missions, and be strong. And so when they get out and they're not okay and they enter back into society, it's a form of weakness to ask for help or to seek help. And I mean, there's medications, and Aaron was on that. And he refused them because they make you numb, they make you a zombie, and he refused to do that. But, long story short, with that is he was doing so good. There at the end, he found, I talk about this. We found pickleball together. That was one of our favorite things to do. And we ended up doing tournaments, traveling and doing tournaments together. So we really thought that maybe that was something that would save him. It gave him a purpose. So it was January 8th. He had just had his best friends come down from Dallas and stay with him. And we'd had Christmas and New Year's. And January 8th was his first day back to work. And I told you he worked for me and coming there. And he didn't show up, which he didn't usually. He went to school in the morning and he came in at noon pretty much every day. I remember that day so specifically because there was something so wrong and so off, and I didn't know what it was. And I remember, and it's pretty normal for Aaron to have these days where, because Aaron didn't sleep, he had, a lot, and he would have to drink himself to sleep because that's just part of your mind, when you're in that state. And he had night terrors. And so there'd be times that it would be like, oh my gosh, I overslept. I'm sorry. So it wasn't like a crucial thing most of the time that if he was a little bit late. This day I knew. I knew there was something wrong. Like there was just something in me that knew something was wrong. And I remember I'd called him and I texted him and there was no response. And he's usually really good about responding and at least letting me know what had happened. And I'll never forget, my mom came in that day. She was headed to yoga, and I said, "Mom, Aaron didn't come in today. And I'm really worried." And she's like we both do, kind of, "Oh, I'm sure he just overslept. He probably, his friends just left," and all the excuses. But we both panicked because at that point it was like 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And so We drove over there. We said we're gonna have to go, and I'll never forget because my mom sent me to my brother's house multiple times to check on him when we couldn't get a hold of him. And I've gone, and I remember my heart pounding. I remember thinking, "This is the day. This is the day," when he didn't answer the door, and I could see him passed out. I'll never forget there's one time I could see him just passed out on a couch, and I thought that day he was dead because I hurt so bad. And he wasn't. He was fine. He got up and he was like, and he gets mad. He's like, "You know I'm fine. Like, why are you checking on me?" And I'll never forget that feeling saying, "Mom, I can't ever be the one to go and I can't be the one to find him like this." And that day, I remember I was so like driving over there, I was so calm. Like I just was like, "Mom, he's gonna be so mad. He's gonna be so mad that we even showed up. He's a grown man, all the things." And so we showed up and there were already cops there because my best friend at the time, she said the same thing. She's like, "You can't be the one to go. I'll go." She went, couldn't get in, called the cops. They showed up. So the cops were already there when we got there. And I knew walking in just by the tears on her face and the cops we couldn't get back there. And it was just a moment of, I remember thinking, I know God was with me during that because I remember there was just angels holding me because I could see in my mind, I didn't care if there was 2 cops there or if there was 6 cops there. I was going to get to him and I couldn't move. I just couldn't move. And so there's a reason for that too. My brother did commit suicide with a gun and he blew his head off. And I mean, that is something I'm not sure I could ever recover from seeing that image alone, thinking about it. And I remember when they brought him out on the gurney, and I just knew God or angels were holding me because I just wanted to jump on that with him and couldn't move again. But the beauty of that story and what I'm saying is this is where our souls were connected because I didn't, that was the first day I didn't feel any more pain. And that's why I didn't think there was anything wrong with him. All of the other times he was still alive and he was still hurting. And so I still felt that. And he was gone now, which meant he has no more pain. And so my pain was gone, that kind of pain. And so that is another testimony of what we shared. So yeah, I very vividly remember that day, but yeah.
One of the most powerful movies that I think I have ever seen. I'm pretty sure I'm getting the name of the movie right, but I'm pretty sure the title of the movie is called Brothers. And in the movie Brothers, one of the main characters played by Tobey Maguire, and people can find this clip. I've seen it on YouTube. I've seen it on Instagram time and time and time again, where Tobey Maguire's character comes home from being deployed, comes home because you learn to compartmentalize when you're on missions. You learn to suppress. You learn to live in the moment to accomplish the mission and fulfill the mission, like you say. And what I don't think a lot of people, and this is, I think, maybe what the military may not prepare people for, is how to deal with the events that took place during your term, during your time, when you return, when you come home, when you're no longer hearing gunshots, when you're no longer on mission, when you're no longer on assignment. And in some ways, people come back and they feel imprisoned, they feel tormented, like you said, the night terrors and maybe the nightmares and the PTSD that is very real. One of my earliest conversations on this platform was with somebody that suffered from PTSD and was an Army Ranger. And the way that he described it was something that I will never fully understand, something that I will never fully comprehend. But I can only imagine how many men and women have been on tours, and because they have learned to compartmentalize, because they give themselves fully to the mission, whether it's things that they've witnessed or things that they've done, when the time comes for them to return home, a lot of them don't know how to regulate. They don't know how to manage their emotions. They don't know how to manage their thoughts. And that is where this concept of PTSD, post traumatic stress disorder, really comes into play. And so before I even transition into your story, I can't help but ask myself and ask you this question. I want to be careful and ask this question with sincerity and sensitivity because I want to honor the memory of your brother and I want to honor the service that he did for this country in those moments when he came back. Because I remember the scene from Brothers where he would just go into fits of rage. And one of them, he took a baseball bat and he would just hit counters and cabinets and everything. And the wife just did not know how to handle it, did not know how to manage it. So my question is simply this: is there any sort of wisdom or encouragement or support that you would give anybody that may be in a position where they've walked through it? Maybe it was a brother, maybe it's a sister, maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a child where they have experienced this in a very real way and maybe they don't know how to cope, whether you want to approach it from the spiritual angle and from the person of the Holy Spirit and Jesus, or you just want to approach it from more of a psychological standpoint. Is there any type of encouragement or counsel or wisdom that you can give anybody that may be experiencing that right now?
That is such a good question and something that I honestly I don't know that I'm qualified to give that information other than my personal experience. And that is definitely, I think from Aaron, from learning Aaron and seeing everything for him, he felt so alone all the time because nobody can relate in the real world with what he's gone through. And I know there's tons of other veterans or military personnel that are there, but he wasn't connected to them here, right where he was. So they have a saying that nobody leaves the rock. And so anybody that's military, it didn't matter if you were the same branch of him or not, but they just knew. It was like military men and women without words, without anything. They know, right? So think that community, I think finding a community of other veterans or other military personnel is so huge because they're the only people that really can understand and comprehend what you've gone through. And I think what I'm learning through my journey is just feeling disconnected is probably one of the hardest things to help cope with on your own, and not knowing that you don't want to take medical or medicine. And Aaron wasn't even into counseling. I through my healing journey went through EMDR processing, and I think it's an amazing tool, and I think it benefits our veterans so much. I think that if Aaron would have done that, because it just moves, and I don't know all of the technical terms of it, but it moves what's stuck in your front brain into the back brain, so you're not actively living that. And so that's what Aaron was doing daily, was living that, replaying what he'd gone through those 11 years, and he couldn't get through that. And I remember with Aaron, that was when Aaron died, I couldn't, for 3 years, I couldn't, or 2 years, I couldn't let anything play in my mind but his death and walking in and seeing that. And I didn't know how to get through that. And I remember when I went through EMDR processing, it went from, now I don't think about it daily. Like, it wasn't just, it moves it into a different part of your brain where you're not actively living and thinking about those things, which made a huge difference for me. So if that would have been something that he would have done. The one thing that I've learned with them, they have to be willing. It's just like any of us, and it doesn't matter what we go through. You have to be willing to go through the healing. You have to be willing to do the work. Me losing Aaron, me going through the things I'm going through now, there's two paths you can take. And I could have continued down the path of darkness and victim and poor me and and destruction, which is, I did that for a very long time, knowing I did not want to live that path. I don't want to live like that. And so I made a conscious decision that I was going to go down the other path, and I didn't care how hard it was. I didn't care how long it took me. I didn't even care where the healing came from at that point, but I knew I didn't want to live like that anymore. And so I dug in and I did the work. And it's not until the past 3 years that I've actually done the real work. I mean, the first 3 years after losing him was just functioning, just surviving. And so now I just think that it's important that they feel that they have somebody that they can talk to, that they can open up to, that they can, and I know a lot of it's hard to open up. And so I don't know what that training is in their brain that goes through. They don't Aaron could never talk about anything he ever did unless he was so drunk he didn't remember it. And I have the most horror stories from him,
Mm.
and it's the only time he would ever share it because they just don't, and I don't think they can even process it in that moment. So I don't know I don't know the exact thing that we played that card 100 times. What could we have done differently? Is there something we could have done? Is there something we missed? Um, and that's just the reality of it. I think that you just have to make sure that they feel that they have a community and they have support and they so I don't know. I don't know other than that what could have done differently. I do think we started a 501(c) for veterans. I will tell you this for Aaron, in Aaron's name, we did a pickleball tournament every year on our birthday, and all of the proceeds go to our homeless veterans. And I will say, I talked to my mom about this. It was hard for me because I love that. Although I love being able to help our veterans, our homeless veterans, I knew that's not the root problem, right? Like we need to hit a bigger, it needs to be hit before they get on the streets. Like they needed help before this. And what we noticed over the 7 years, maybe that we did the tournament and over 10 homeless people off the streets, what we did find when we'd go back and follow up is majority of them were back on the streets. And after interviewing a few of them, it was because when you take them out of their chaos, they go from chaos zone to a different zone. And then on the streets, and this is what one homeless man told us, on the streets, there's chaos, there's noise, there's, it, and that's what they're comfortable in. We took them out of that and put them in a isolated apartment that was quiet, that was not, and they didn't have the tools to deal
Mm.
with that. And so that was almost more torture for them. Think about it. I don't know if you've ever been in a place where you've had to sit with yourself. I'm going through that right now in my healing. To sit with yourself through that healing process is almost unbearable when you don't have that PTSD. And so you take somebody that is used to gunshots and fighting and war and all of the things to putting them in an isolated an apartment and say, here you go. They don't know what to do with that. And that was so isolating to them. So that's another thing. I think I would always talk to my mom about that and say it is a bigger issue. It was a bigger battle that we have to fight. And I think that's a government level that these men, just like they are trained to go into battle, they need to be trained to come back home. I just don't think they get enough of that. They're
Mm.
just sent back out and it's like, okay, wash your hands of you and good luck, and so that's a really sad, sad thing to see. But I know there's a lot of resources out there, and I know there's a lot of people that are finding support in those areas. But I don't know from our experience what actually works.
There's a lot of talk about suffering in silence, and people talk about the number of men and women that suffer in silence, that they just don't ask for help. They don't ask for the support. They just choose to continue with whatever dysregulated state that they're in. But there's something else that you referenced. And instead of it being suffering in silence, I would say it's sitting in silence. And you talked about sitting with yourself and that is a very uncomfortable place. And this has been something in my own journey that I have really tried to be intentional with, and that is looking at myself in the mirror beyond just getting myself ready in the morning and holding my gaze, looking
Mhm.
at myself in the eyes. It's one thing to look into the eyes of someone else and to hold their gaze. And even that can sometimes be uncomfortable, but to actually try and hold your own gaze and to do so in silence. No podcast. You're not listening to Joe Rogan. You're not listening to Priscilla Shire. You're not listening to Chris Williamson. You're not listening to Mel Robbins. You're not listening to your favorite worship artist. You're not listening to your favorite pastor or preacher or evangelist. You're there in the silence. It is probably one of the most uncomfortable and unfamiliar
Um,
places to be in because it's in those moments where your thoughts, your emotions, your feelings can somehow become so incredibly loud. And your brother that was so used to so much noise and so much noise, and then to put them in a place where there's silence. I think the reverse is true of us, where you put us in the area of silence and all we hear is the noise of our own voices, the noise of our
Yes.
own thoughts, the noise of our emotions, the noise of our questions, the noise of our doubts, the noise of our fears, and they can sometimes become deafening. And as I'm listening to you talk, all I can think about is how vividly you described that moment that you realized that your brother was gone and what that experience was like. And you were able to describe that in great detail. But I want to build on that because I want to ask a different question and take this from a different slant. As much as you remember where you were when you realized that your brother had taken his life, do you remember where you were, what you were doing, what you were thinking, or what you were feeling when you made the decision that you were no longer going to stay in a place of grief, a place of sorrow, a place of sadness, where you were going to once and for all make the decision that you were going to take your life back? Because that is essentially what I think that your story and your journey declares. And I think that is probably one of the greatest testimonies that you have is Kylie made the decision to take her life back. She was going to find joy again. She was going to find peace again. She was going to find rest again. She was going to find all of these different things that scripture makes it very clear. Weeping may endure for the night, but joy comes in the morning. And be still and know that I am God. Do you remember what it was like when you finally made the decision that you were no longer going to live in this place of grief and sorrow, but that you were actually going to pursue your own healing?
There wasn't a day. There wasn't just one day. I mean, it's been a from the beginning, I'm not gonna live I don't wanna live like this. Now, I did for a year and another year, in the suffering because even though I made that decision, I couldn't get past it. And I think that's a lot of what we deal with PTSD. It's like nobody wants to live in that, right? Nobody wants to keep suffering, but you don't know how to get through it. And so I had made that decision, but I still couldn't find myself healing, right, properly. I still found myself drinking extra or coping with this or feeling numb. I mean, I cannot tell you the amount of times I drove home and forgot my kids at school or at their activity because you just can't even function. I don't even know how I was able to drive. I don't even remember driving. There was just this period of like a good solid 2 years of I don't even know how I made it through. It was just, I guess, on autopilot, right? Like you just get up and you know you go to work, and but I wasn't really functioning at any of the things that I did, and so that's where I intentionally decided I was against, as a Christian, I was against energy healing or hypnosis or definitely antidepressants, all of the things, and it just got to a point where I was like, I don't care where it comes from. I know that I have to do something. And so I tried it all. I mean, I was like, okay. And it wasn't until I actually did all of the tools were helpful for certain things, but it wasn't until I did EMDR processing that I was actually able to release Aaron and release that whatever that I don't even know the term, whatever that I can't even think of the word I'm thinking of. It's paralyzing, whatever that paralyzing feeling was that was over me, that kept me from living, that kept me from joy. Even knowing, like I talked about this, I've been a Christian my whole life, but I've never known God the way that I have just learned him recently. But even then, I didn't know God enough to know, like, I couldn't, I tried praying, I tried reading the Bible, I tried talking to him, but there was nothing there because there was nothing there for me. Like I was so numb. And so I think that if I can relate anything to probably what PTSD is, it's probably very similar. I had never known depression or anxiety or any of those things until I went through that. And that's a very awakening thing to think that this is not just something that people can get through on their own. I mean, it's kind of like what we say now. I think that I can't do life without God. Like that is just, no matter how much I try, if I don't have God in my life, the rest doesn't work, right? Like I can somewhat push my way through that. But so I think that's kind of that moment of when I decided I needed to get help or I was not going to live like this, I needed to get help. I needed to wherever that came from. So there's not the one day.
Mm,
It was always knowing that was what my goal was. And I had to fight. Like I had to fight through some years because I couldn't find the help for so long. I didn't know what that was. And so it was an everyday battle. So
mm. Would you agree or disagree with the statement that time heals all wounds?
that's a great question. Yes and no. I mean, it's 8 years in, and I feel like I can breathe again easily and I can talk about him. I mean, today was a little bit more emotional just because of the dynamic, but I can actually talk about him now. I can look at pictures. I can listen to his voice. I can without, without crying or without it was almost like out of sight, out of mind. You think that's the only way you can handle it. And so I guess I could say time does because I'm here 8 years later and can say I feel the relief and I feel I think that love doesn't have the hardship of a death is the love that you have for somebody. And I don't think that that goes away, right? So I don't know that I'm explaining that right, but there's so much love for him that time's not going to push that away. Right. So it looks different. It looks very different. And so I do think that with time, just like anything else, your journeys expand, they look different. But do I think that time heals it all? No, I don't think that that's what heals it. I mean, you have to do the work. Um, so
I think one of the greatest truths contained in scripture is that God is eternal. He does not operate within the parameters or the confines of time
um,
because he exists outside of time. In the
yes,
beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. But let's just take it a step further and just say, in the beginning, before there was anything, before the heavens and the earth were created, before the galaxies, before anything that we see or taste or feel or touch was created, he was. John made it very clear when he opened his gospel. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. It is very evident that God is eternal. It is very evident that He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. It was Jesus who made the declaration in the book of Revelation that I am the Alpha and Omega. He's the beginning and the end, the first and the last. And I find great comfort in that because to answer the same question that I asked you of whether or not time heals all wounds, in my opinion, I don't feel time heals anything. The reason why I don't feel that time heals anything is because you and I serve an eternal God. And because he operates and because he exists in eternity, time has to bend to his will. Time
yeah,
has to bend to his sovereignty. Time has to surrender itself to his will. He is the one that can reverse time. He is the
yeah,
one that can cause the sun to stand still, like Joshua prayed. And there has not been a day like that since, nor will there ever be a day when God hearkened unto a man and allowed the sun to stand still, so much so that I believe some people believe that that had a significant impact just even today. But he's able to use time. He's able to redeem time. And I think this is one of the things that I love about scripture is Paul talking about redeeming the time for the days are evil. It is no secret that we are living in evil days. It is no secret that we are living in days of darkness and wickedness. And yet, at the end of the day, the one who exists outside of time, the one who exists in eternity, can use it and he can do with it whatever he wants. And he chose to come in the form of a human man, take on the form of flesh. And at one point in his ministry, he stood outside of a tomb and commanded the stone to be rolled away. And after 4 days of a man being dead and buried in a tomb, he issued a command, Lazarus come forth. And Lazarus came forth, and he demonstrated that he is sovereign and that he has all authority and power. And so if I'm answering your question, if I'm answering that question myself, I don't think that time heals anything. I think that time is a tool and an instrument that God gives us. And he gives it to us because it comes with a responsibility. It comes
Yeah.
with an assignment. It comes with the need to put in effort and energy in pursuing our own healing. And if we understand that time is currency and that we can never get time back, it is
Yeah.
the one thing that probably needs to be spent more wisely than anything else, more wisely than any dollar bill, more wisely than Amex or MasterCard or Discover or Visa. Time is one of those things that has to be spent wisely because you can never and you will never get it back. And I hear your story and I hear you describe how time didn't heal the wounds and time didn't heal the wound that was inflicted upon me when I lost my dad. Time didn't heal the grief and the sorrow that I experienced when my first marriage ended and I walked through divorce. Time did not heal that. But what did happen was I had a loving father who was willing to invest in me and was willing to give me time, even though he could not give me time back with my dad, even though he
Yeah.
could not give you time back with your brother, even though he could not afford that to either one of us. What he did do was give us what I would say is an even greater gift, and that is one day at a time, where now we can focus ourselves on pursuing our healing, pursuing our growth, pursuing our maturity. And I absolutely love that because he is the one that heals, and I think this is what's so significant about one of his names in scripture is Jehovah Rapha. He is the God that heals, and it is him that is healing you, and it is him that's healing me. He's healing our hearts, he's healing our wounds, he's healing our grief and our sorrow, and he's allowing us to pick up the pieces. He's allowing us to move on. And one of the things that I am learning is that sometimes when we are hurting, those are the times when we need to be helping. It is through our
Yes.
pain that we discover our purpose. It is through our wounds that we discover our wisdom. And I think that this brings us full circle to where you have a platform on Instagram where now you're sharing your own journey and you are being raised up in a way that you are able to be a voice, you are able to provide encouragement. And so I want to talk about that. Having gone through everything that you've experienced, having made the conscious and deliberate decision to embrace your healing and to pursue your healing, and now to be at a place where the memories will never go away. But what you have the ability to do is no longer live in the past, but you allow yourself to live in the moment. You allow yourself to embrace what's in front of you. And so, with that, you have this amazing Instagram page that I absolutely love. And now you're on it and you're sharing what God has done in you. Let's talk about what God has done for Kiley Lane. If you could describe it for you, having pursued EMDR, having pursued all of these other things, the one thing that surpassed it all was his willingness to rescue you, his willingness to hold you, his willingness to take you by the hand. And it's that old poem where there's two footprints in the sand, and eventually those two footprints become one set of footprints. Lord, how come when it was my darkest moments, when it was my most trying moments, there was only one set of footprints? Why did you abandon me? Why did you leave me? Why did you forsake me? And with tenderness and compassion and affection, he says, it was during those moments that I carried you. It was during those moments that I held you. So, how did he carry you? How did he hold you? And how does he continue to do that even to this day?
Is a whole nother podcast on itself. I feel like that part of my journey. So I'm going to try because I could just go on. I mean, this is probably this is the full circle where everything that I've gone through and everything that I've experienced and all of my trials and tribulations have genuinely brought me to this place. And it started in I think October 1st. And I mentioned to the viewers, I've always been a Christian. I've always raised knowing Jesus and growing up in a church. I ran my church nursery. I went to a Christian university my first year of college. I've known scripture from the Bible, but what I realized is I never knew Jesus. It was such superficial Christianity that I knew. And, God was when it was convenient. And I never knew context behind the scripture. So I could quote scripture, but I didn't know scripture. I didn't have discernment. I didn't have wisdom. I didn't know the fruits of the spirit. And it's a crazy thing to think about being in your 40s. Like, how did I get this far not knowing all of those things? Right. Well, if you knew my past and if you knew, you'd know why, right? Like, it's because I didn't have discernment, didn't have the wisdom. It's like, I'm now living out the consequences of my decisions without following Jesus, right? Properly. But
Mhm.
in October, so I've lost my brother. I've gone years of trying to heal, trying to figure out who I am. And let's just say I went most years of self development, self help, right? And I'm embarrassed to say that, but that was my journey for so long. And that is the worst thing to do. I mean, that is outside of God, right? Like I've tried to self heal. I tried to all the things and thinking I was doing it with God, in scripture and things, but it was a very shallow and selfish stage of my life. So fast forward, this really started about a year and a half ago, having a complete meltdown and breakdown in my life, in my career. I've been running my family's business. I've been working for them and running their business for 16 years at this point, 15 years at this point. I am maxed out. I cannot function anymore. I've lost my marriage. I've gone through relationships. I've recently decided I just cannot keep going at this speed. I was losing myself. I was losing my hair. I was down to nothing weight wise and lived, breathed this business. And it was so mentally exhausting and taxing for me. And I didn't have any support during that time. And so I really think I was in the middle of a breakdown, mental breakdown. And then so I kind of stepped down from that position, trying to figure out what my life looks like at that stage. I enter a relationship. It was a very, very, very toxic relationship. And I didn't know because we had God, like we prayed together. I mean, we quoted scriptures
Mhm.
together. So I really thought it was and I was in such a bad place. I think I was needing rescued, right? Like I was searching for that something, whether it was a man or something to provide for me. And not just financially, I could do that. But so it was a really vulnerable state in my life. And I jumped full in and it was not quite a year, but I mean, engaged quickly, moved very quickly, all the things. But I knew during that relationship, and I didn't know if it was him or the job or what, but I could settle my nervous system. I was in fight or flight mode all the
Mhm.
time. And I didn't even know what that was at the time. So, but I knew something wasn't right. I mean, internally, and that for us is God, but I didn't know because I didn't have the personal relationship with God that I do now then. So I was really just trying to figure out what was happening. I ended up leaving that relationship the end of September and October, my whole life's changed. I didn't I didn't know how to do life anymore. I'm no longer in a relationship. I'm in a home I can't afford now. I'm in a vehicle I can't afford now on my own. I'm about to lose my job that I've worked for 16 years in, and I didn't know what that looked like. And I couldn't, that was the end for me. That was the lowest moment for me. I can honestly say I didn't want to live anymore. That was the moment I was like, I surrender. I give up. I do not want to do life anymore. And I just remember hitting my knees, literally begging God, I don't even know who you are anymore, but if you're real, you know, I need you, or I'm begging you to take me. And that's the moment that everything changed for me. I'm one of the lucky ones that got to experience Jesus in real time. People ask me, what was it like? It wasn't I didn't see him. I felt his presence. Like it was, I just knew he was there and he had wrapped me in his arms. And for that day forward, from that time to 3 months, I didn't leave my house. I couldn't eat. I couldn't drink. I literally lived off of the Bible. I lived off of it, the living word. That is what gave me life at that time. And I just knew I was going to go all in and devote my entire life to God and figuring out who he is, what he is. My whole life has been based on conditional love. So learning God, and I didn't know, I guess I somehow had always
Mhm.
considered God like the love I had been given my earthly father, or whatever it would have been. So there was always this, I didn't even know how good God was because I don't know how good, I just didn't know. And so I just spent the next 3 months avidly, intentionally seeking him and learning everything that I could about him and context and what everything meant, and realized I was living such a human, self led life over a God led life. It was my desires, all of the things. So what I found through this journey, and I lost everything. And I use that term loosely because I didn't lose. I know that, but I lost my job. I lost my relationship that I was, and it broke me. I lost friends, multiple friends, best friends. And what I learned, I did a video on this, kind of that God, but God, why? Why did I have to lose everything? And what was so powerful for me and what he showed me was I had to lose everything that I was more dependent on that than I was him. And for me, that just happened to be everything pretty much. So I had to lose everything, in a sense, to find him. And you mentioned something earlier, and I want to tell you a little bit. My journey today was so much about Job, my Bible study. I'm going through this stage and I'm posting a little bit about this. I found God in a whole new way, but I'm undoing 44 years of culture and society and not knowing really who God is. And then I'm stepping into this God identity, and it's messy. It is hard, and it's painful. It is so painful. And I go through days of, although I know how good God is, I'm like, why is it so hard? And there's days that I don't feel like I can get through. But when you know God like we do, you know that you can, because I no longer, it's the surrender. I can't surrender. And that's the only time that I'm struggling, is when I'm still carrying what's not mine to carry. Right. And so as I'm learning these stages, I thought, I want to post about this. I want to share this. And I don't know how to share this testimony, this part of my testimony. I'm still very awkward on camera. I still am not comfortable on camera. So I do a lot of just songs and my messages, and then trying to slowly incorporate things. But I am such a new Christian. I'm such a new true Christian that I don't have, there's times that I'm like, I don't feel qualified. It's not even that, but I don't even know how to share what God's done for me in a biblical sense that is maybe worthy of sharing yet. So a lot of that is coming, but it's the journey of my sole purpose now is to tell the world about Jesus and how good he is and what he's done. And I don't know how to do that yet. I don't know all the ways to do it yet, but I was loving that because I had a really hard day yesterday. It was probably one of the hardest. I'm in the process of building my own company now and starting my own company. And with that comes a lot of grief and a lot of hardships. And so there are days where I just am like, I don't, God, are you sure I can do this? And yesterday was one. Yesterday was one that I could hear the fear, the noises of the fear and doubt and unworthiness and all of that come into play. And so I've learned tools. I have tools now, and that first and foremost, it's God and praying. And I've learned how to sit still, be in that. And what I've learned is it's okay to have those feelings, but those we don't act on them. Like I let them, I sit there and I feel them. I'm like, it's okay to feel them, but I know my God is bigger than them. And so those are times that I just have to surrender and say, God, I'm going to need you to take this. This is more than I can carry. And it's an all day thing. I'm not able to just get out of it in a couple of hours. Hopefully that lessens the more but I got into Job, and there was a beautiful sermon that a friend of mine sent me on trials and tribulation. And of course, he speaks about find pure joy in the trials and tribulations. And we know that through those, we gain endurance, perseverance, all of the things that come out of it. I was reminded of oil. Oil is not powerful until it's an olive, until it's been pressed, right? Like we need extreme pressure in order to refine our character. And so I just needed a lot of refining, obviously. And I think that's why I have so much pain. But Job was so important. At the end, he said, read the last 5 chapters of Job. And so I did. I went and read those chapters today. And it's the chapters of God fronting Job after he's like, why all the things? I I think I cry. Talk about the living word. God was speaking to me and through me in those 5 chapters. And I just wrote so much down. But the first thing that said was God was exposing Job's position. And he says in there, where were you when I laid the earth's foundation? And that was so powerful to me. And it goes through all of the creation, all of the animals, all of the power in this. And in that moment, you're like, what is the relevance of this, right? But the actual relevance of this is God is saying, were you there when I created this, when I created all of this? How could you ever comprehend what I'm doing or what? Because I'm a type of person, I need to know why. I need to know, I need to understand it. I need clarity. And then I feel like I can have peace. God, give me clarity and then I can have peace. Why are they doing this? And what God showed me was you are asking from answers from a position you don't have the capacity to hold. And I was like, my gosh. And so when you see it in a perspective of like that, he's
Mhm.
shifting his perspective. And Job was in a point where he was seeing, I learned this yesterday, when you're in suffering, your vision narrows. And so that's where I've been. I've been focused on my pain, my suffering, my confusion, right? Which is exactly what Job was. And God needed to open that up to his sovereignty, his power, his wisdom, and that it's so much bigger than ours. And so when I read that and I could see all of that, it was so profound in the aspect of why I've had to go through what I've had to go through. And so that's a little part of why I'm actively shifting to where I'm actually shifting to on my platform and sharing that
Yeah.
testimony, sharing these real life times that I'm one of those that thinks I need to be fully healed before I share. If I need to fully be known before I share. And God's like,
Mhm.
no, people want this. They want the
Mm.
real, like in the moment. What do you do when you're suffering? What are you doing because I think sometimes we think Christians have it all figured out. Or not even just Christians, but there's people that we think they've got it all figured out. And that's just not the case. And life, you never will. I
No.
don't think the trials and tribulations ever stop. So hopefully they get less and less because we have more tools and we know how big our God is. That's what the change is, right? My problems are so big because I didn't know how big God was. And now learning how big God is, and that I'm actually not the one that has to carry that. Pretty profound.
I've always appreciated the story of Job. And one of the things that has always captivated me about that story is that even though the devil took his 10 children, even though the devil robbed him of his possessions, even though the devil had attacked his body and had attacked his health, he was only ever able to operate within the confines and the borders and the boundaries of God's sovereignty. God still was supreme. God was still sovereign. Even in the midst of Job's suffering, the devil could not do any more than what God had allowed him to. And I find great comfort in that, is that no matter what the roaring lion brings against us, no matter how much the gates of hell try and prevail against us, no matter how many times the weapons are formed against us, the weapons that are formed against us, they will not prosper. The gates of hell will not prosper. It does not mean that the weapons won't come against us. It does not mean that the gates of hell won't try. Doesn't mean that the enemy won't prowl around seeking whom he may devour. Doesn't mean that we won't go through trials and tribulations. And Paul said we must, through many trials and tribulations, enter the kingdom of heaven. But one of
Yeah.
the things that I so appreciate about Job and appreciate about what you said is that God is not obligated to give us answers to our questions. He's not obligated to give us answers to our suffering. He's not obligated to give us answers to even our pain. And a lot of times we think that answers will bring peace. And
Yeah.
I think that that is a very shallow, shallow place to be in when we expect answers to bring peace, because to do that minimizes the fact that He is the Prince of Peace. To do that minimizes the fact that he gives us peace, which passes all understanding. And it's that peace that soon crushes Satan under our feet. To do that minimizes the fact that he keeps those in perfect peace whose mind is stayed upon him. And God never told Job why he went through what he
Yeah.
went through. He
Never.
never explained the two encounters in heaven. He never revealed to him that it was, at the end of the day, it was God that served Job up. It was
Yeah.
God that asked the question of Satan, "Have you considered my servant Job?" It was his idea. And that's what I don't think a lot of people realize. But at the end, instead of giving him answers, instead of giving him reasons, instead of appealing to his logic, instead of appealing to his emotions, instead of appealing to his reason, he appealed to something greater. And that was, he appealed to his relationship, and he revealed himself. Job, even in the midst of everything that you've gone through, there is something of greater value than what you have gone through. And that is knowing who I am, having a revelation of me. I was there when as we mentioned earlier in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Job, this is who I am. This is who I've always been. And the greatest benefit, that pearl of great price that comes out of your suffering, is not answers, it's relationship. And
Yeah.
that is what you're experiencing. That is what I'm experiencing, is that, Kylie, what is of greater importance than anything to me is being in relationship with you, and you being in relationship with me. Stephen, what is of greater importance is us being in relationship with each other. And it does not come with answers, it does not come with reasons, but it does come with my sovereignty. It does come with my protection. It does come with my provision. It does come with my promises. And because of that, you can trust me. Because of
Yeah.
that, you can put your faith in me. Because of that, you can have confidence, and you can have confidence to come boldly before the throne of grace to receive grace and mercy to help in time of need. It is available to you. It is available to me. It is available to anyone that would listen to this conversation or
Yeah.
watch this conversation. And it is a daily struggle. It is a daily battle. It requires continued surrender, continued submission, continued humility, a continual sacrificing of the Isaac of my understanding, the Isaac of my intellect, the Isaac of my reasoning, the Isaac of my needing to know how and why and when things happen. I need to be willing to surrender the Isaac of my own understanding. Trust in the Lord with all of your heart and lean not on your own understanding. Acknowledge
Mhm.
him in all of your ways, and he will direct your paths. And if there's anything that I would give anybody, is that it is simply this: it's an invitation to trust. It's an invitation to maintain that confidence in him, because at the end of the day, no matter what we go through, there is one great promise that we have in scripture. And that is the words of the Apostle Paul when he said, "I am confident of this one thing, that he who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it." And I'm reminded of a great promise that's at the end of scripture in the book of Revelation. And these words are in red letters. And it's simply this: Behold, I make all things new. Kylie, he's making you new. Stephen, he's making you new. He's making us new. And he can and will make anyone new if they would only ask him. Ask and it shall be given. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door shall be open. You have not because you ask not.
It's
If you
not,
want
yeah.
healing, if you want growth, if you want maturity, you need only ask, you need only seek, you need only knock. And he will give you exactly what you need. Maybe not in the timing that you want, maybe not in the manner in which you expect it, maybe not the way that you had dreamed or hoped he would do it, but he will give you exactly what he needs. And it's one of the things that my dad always said: God is the slowest person I know, but he's always on time. And he always
Yeah.
shows up exactly on time. He always shows up right when he needs to because he, like the father that he is, the loving father that he is, he knows best. I believe it was a show years ago. Never watched it, but I think it was Father Knows Best. Pretty sure it was a show. I could be completely wrong, but he is our father who knows best, and he knows exactly what we need when we need it. And so there's so much more that you and I can talk about. This is a formal invitation to continue the conversation and to have part two and to learn more about what the Lord has done in your life and what he's doing in this country. So before I conclude this, I want to take 15 seconds of just silence. It's amazing how quickly 15 seconds actually goes. I was expecting it to take a lot longer, but it actually went by pretty quickly. But Kylie, I want to thank you for your time. I want to thank you for your willingness to have this conversation. I know that this is perhaps out of your comfort zone, but I want you to know that you did absolutely incredible and that I enjoyed this conversation. And I know that God is using you and that God is going to continue to use you. And I pray that He continues to bless you. And I pray that He continues to allow His face to shine upon you and His favor to rest upon you.
Thank you. I've enjoyed it so much, Stephen. I appreciate you taking the time with me and allowing me to share my journey.
It is my pleasure. It is any time. And this is the first of, I'm sure, more than one conversation. And I pray that God continues to bless you, continues to lead you, and continues to guide you.